Good morning. Welcome, Powerful Moments Sunday School class. Glad you're here this morning. Jamie's passing out our handout for today. So we're in Mark chapter 14, verses 43 through 52. So thanks to Jeff for teaching last week for me. And they'll be back. Mark and Jeff will be back by popular demand here in a little while, so we appreciate them very much for doing that and allow Martha and I to travel more than we've traveled in ever, I guess. So we're at least I'm enjoying that. I'm not sure how much Martha's enjoying the travel. So yeah. Yeah. So believe it or not, we started the study of Mark in April of 2022, and we're down to the last, after today, the last 8 lessons. So the goal, some of those are long lessons, but the goal is to finish by the end of this year. So we should be able to do that. So we're just, it feels good to be able to conclude something, right? And then we'll go back to Genesis. We ended with Abraham's death in chapter 25 in Genesis, and we'll pick up there for a while, and then I don't know where we'll go back in the New Testament yet. We'll have to figure that out. Any suggestions, recommendations on where to go in the New Testament, we'll take those and see if that's where we go, I guess. So, Jill, what about backpacks? Martha, would you hand her the microphone, please? Yeah. I don't believe it's on.
We started the backpack ministry last Sunday, and we gave out, Cindy, what do you think, maybe half? Okay, so we got probably 30 left. And if you would like to get a backpack, you can come between Sunday school and church, or even after church, we'll be out there as well. But if you do not want to shop, you know me and my shopping record, I don't mind. So if you want to give me money, I'll be glad to. But if you can do that as soon as possible so I can get that taken care of. There's 2 up there on the stage already. Thank y'all.
Yeah. So, Jill, can you get more than one backpack if you want more? You can get as many backpacks as you want, Jill says. Yeah, and I think Bo provided the backpacks, didn't he? Yeah, so the Bibles and the backpacks are complimentary. So all you got to do is put stuff in them. And there's a list out there, Jill, of what to get for. Oh, thank you, Stan. Okay, so there's Jill saying you can choose your age group. There's lists out there by age group for what to put in. So, okay, thank you. Other announcements this morning. Mark, men's group tonight. Who are you talking about? Jonathan. Okay. Oh. So Jonathan, the friend of David, I presume that Jonathan, huh? Okay. So, and Mark said, if you ever lost anything, then what'd you finish that again? How was your reaction if you ever lost anything? Jill prays about it, and she can find her car keys and everything from that. So you might, you might want to share that verse with Mark for tonight. So good. All right. Anything else for today? Okay. Let's see. Trying to think. Do we have any? I don't know that we. Oh, Jamie. Jamie's on the search committee for family pastor. Any early initial report yet, Jamie? Okay. Okay. Next Sunday is their first meeting to begin discussion about a family pastor. Okay, great. All right, anything else? All right, someone like to open us in prayer this morning then? Mark, thank you. Okay, thank you, Mark. All right, let's begin. If you would, the title of the lesson today is The Kiss of Death. So have you ever heard the phrase, the kiss of death? And if so, what was it applied to when you heard that? Any examples you can think of? All right, Jill says that it might be good, but then in hindsight it's not good, possibly. Yeah? No. What's that? Dracula, the kiss of death. Yeah. Well, I didn't think about that, so yeah. So, 2 or 3 that I thought of, you might have heard at some time, was missing that deadline was the kiss of death to the project. That's one, maybe. Or that the bad book review from that popular critic was the kiss of death for that new author. And then unfortunately, his endorsement was the kiss of death for her campaign. So all of those, sometimes it means, that we'll see today that it's the end as such. The kiss of death is the end. Now there were a number of movies titled The Kiss of Death. The earliest one that I found on YouTube was from 1947. So let's take a couple of minutes, set the stage here, and watch this movie, The Kiss of Death, from 1947.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. North and South America and all the ships at sea. Let's go to press. This is Walter Winchell broadcasting from Hollywood. I just came from a projection room at 20th Century Fox Studios where I saw a picture of my town, New York, and my time now. Ladies and gentlemen, the title of this moving picture is Kiss of Death. In underworld lingo, kiss of death can be many things, none of them good. A pat on the shoulder from a pal that turns into a bullet in the back, or a kiss from a woman's warm lips that sends the victim to the morgue. Like Boomerang and the house on 92nd Street, this one has authenticity stamped all over it. It is red meat. It is factual. It's a close-up of the tenderloin in action. Its tempo is terrific. And its story is that of a squealer. In underworld code, a squealer is marked for death. One man sneered at the code, squealed, and didn't die. That's what makes Kiss of Death such a gripping and exciting moving picture.
Kids like to have fun. We'll all have some fun together. You and me and your wife and your kids.
Touch my family and you'll hear singing like you never heard before. Go on, beat it.
Nick, he's a 3-time loser now. All we've got to do is catch him with a gun on him and we can send him up for life.
And suppose he don't make a mistake. He didn't the last time. You made the mistake.
Sooner or later he'll trip himself up. They all do. You've got to trust me.
I'm through trusting you, the police, or anybody but me. There's only one way to get you, though. And that's my way.
If you like action as I do with entertainment, you'll find it here. This one was written with a machine gun.
So the kiss of death is a fairly well-known idiom, I guess you would say. So where do you think that came from? Yeah, and the kiss of death. The subject of our verses today in Mark is Judas's kiss of Jesus. So, Martha, I didn't give you this page to read, but I'm going to give it to you now. This is from the prison ministry, and it's a summary of the concept of betrayal and the kiss of death. So, Martha, if you would read that.
For many people, the experience of betrayal feels like the kiss of death. Most of us at one time or another experience the searing pain of being betrayed by someone we counted on and who seemed to care for us, a trusted friend who breaks our confidence by sharing a secret we didn't want anyone else to know, a friendly boss who blatantly ignores our years of faithful service to bestows his favor on a total newcomer, a lover whose kisses turn into an inexplicable affection for someone else, a friend who takes advantage of our long-standing friendship and trust to leverage advantage or profit at our expense. Experiences like this hurt us deeply, especially when the trust and love we thought we shared are used to hurt and ruin us. Betrayal has many faces, but the most painful of all betrayals comes when someone whose affection we knew so well turns into a conspiracy against us. Without a doubt, the story of Jesus' betrayal by the kiss of Judas is the quintessential story of betrayal, and yet it is a story that is different from any other story of betrayal I have ever heard. Jesus, realizing he is about to be sold out by Judas, greets him in the moment of betrayal, and though recognizing what is to transpire, Jesus calls him friend. Jesus neither resists Judas nor attempts to turn the tables on a man who has been one of his closest companions in proclaiming the good news of God's love. Judas was as self-serving and a man as there ever was. He'd have to be such to think he would betray both man and God by a kiss. Judas was a chosen companion, one of the 12 who ate and drank and lived with Jesus through many miracles and wonders on land and sea. He'd seen the proof of God in Jesus, but betrayed his friend with a kiss of death for what he thought was personal gain. Yet beyond the kiss of death is the mystery of God's amazing grace. For though betrayed to death, Jesus overcame the insult and the injury of betrayal through his death and resurrection. Betrayal is not the end of our story, for as we look up from our self-interest and self-possession, we see Jesus who still calls us friend and loves us more than we have ever been loved by anyone, compelling us to live gratefully and gracefully without duplicity.
All right, thank you, Martha. So, good overview by the Prison Fellowship Ministry of the verses that we're going to get into in detail today. So, Martha, we're going to let you read on now in Mark chapter 14, verses 43 through 45, if you would, please.
And immediately while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, came up, accompanied by a crowd with swords and clubs, who were from the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. Now he who was betraying him had given them a signal, saying, "Whomever I kiss, he is the one. Arrest him and lead him away under guard."
All right, so in this verses again, we see that word Mark uses often, that word immediately. So, as we said from the beginning, Mark's gospel is an action-packed gospel. He moves quickly from one situation to the other, and here we see him moving quickly with a shortened account of what happened in the garden compared to some of the other gospels that give a little bit more detail. So the Jewish religious leaders, authorities, with the help of Judas, have now found this opportune time or situation to arrest Jesus. So they had been plotting this for some time, and now the opportunity presented itself. The disciples were isolated in this garden outside of Jerusalem. It was the middle of the night, so they could do this without a lot of observation by the people. So in the verses that Martha read, there's several key actors in this drama that unfolded in Gethsemane, the Garden of Gethsemane. Who were some of the key actors that participated in this drama in Gethsemane? Judas was one of them, certainly. Who else? Jesus, yeah, the most important actor. Yep. Good. Jesus always a good answer in Sunday school, isn't it, Jill? Or encourage group. Yeah. Who else? The chief priests were there. Yeah. Roman soldiers were there. Scribes and elders were there. Exactly. Who else? Satan was probably there. Yeah, Satan was there, cheering it on. So, and on down further, it's not in the verses that Martha read, but we'll see, it is who he's in there. Who's kind of the other actor we see in there? Peter. We see Peter in there. So
The other disciples were there too.
the other disciples, apostles were there too. So we see them as well. So, and a young man was there, and we're going to talk about him here a little bit later. So it's a number or several actors or groups of actors that are in the garden that night that we'll see are representative of many people today and people's relationship with Jesus. So the mob entered the garden at night. They came with a very different demeanor than the crowd that welcomed Jesus into Jerusalem just a few days ago. That crowd was cheering him on and laying down palm leaves and excited about his coming into Jerusalem. And now we see on this fateful night that a very different situation of this angry mob here in the Garden of Gethsemane. So the Gospel of John describes the scene as follows. It says, so Judas, having obtained the Roman cohort and officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, came there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. So it sounds like your typical mob coming with lanterns and torches and weapons. So the first group we want to talk about is the lynch mob. Fill in the blanks. Lynch mob. So who would be included again in this lynch mob? We named them, but who? One more. Excuse me. Jews and the Romans are included. What specific Jews and Romans? I think Alice named all the Jews there. Who were they again? Chief priests, scribes, and elders. So, and the Roman, it says a Roman cohort. A Roman cohort could consist up to 600 soldiers. So this may have not been a small group coming into the garden to arrest Jesus. So again, this group of chief priests, scribes, and elders are representative or a number of the folks that were included in the Jewish ruling body called the Sanhedrin, thank you, which consisted of, and I've seen different numbers of this, anywhere from 70 to 72 members of the Sanhedrin, depending on what theologian that you want to read, but somewhere around 70 members or so. So the chief priests, again, were predominantly Sadducees. The scribes were predominantly Pharisees, and the elders were prominent lay people. So we have three groups as such of the Jewish people represented in these chief priests, scribes, and elders. So, and we also have there, it says the officers from the chief priests. So the Sanhedrin, the chief priests had their own private police force as such. So they were also included in this mob as such that was in the Garden of Gethsemane that night. So fill in the blanks here. The what of Jews and Romans represent a group who are to God. Mob of Jews and Romans represent a group who are blind to God. These folks did not recognize Jesus as God, as a God-man that came to arrest him. So then the next actor we want to talk about is Judas. And in Mark 14:44 it says, "Now he who was betraying him had given them a signal saying, 'Whoever I kiss, he is the one. Arrest him and lead him away under guard.'" So again, a shameful, despicable act of betrayal and hypocrisy on the part of Judas. So Judas represents one who abandons, thank you, Jill, God. So after spending 3 years in daily close contact with Jesus and being seemingly a friend and follower of Jesus, Judas abandons God, here we see. Okay, so do we know people like that today? Yeah. What about them? How would you describe people that are like Judas today? Self-centered. Yeah, that's a good description. Self-centered. I think that would certainly describe Judas, or a Judas today. What else? Two-faced, Jill says, so hypocritical. Yeah, certainly. Greedy. Yeah. Anything else? I think we've talked about those people sometimes, that they have a head knowledge of God, but not a heart knowledge. Judas certainly knew a lot about Jesus. He had a lot of head knowledge about Jesus, but it appears that he never actually had a heart knowledge of Jesus, a heart relationship with Jesus. So Judas, as we've said before, Judas is kind of that guy standing in the garage thinking he's a car, but not so, right? Again, a head knowledge, but not a heart knowledge. So Jesus was a popular person. He had a big, gigantic parade that welcomed him into Jerusalem. So why would Judas be needed to identify Jesus? This mob wanted Judas to, when they went into the garden, to identify Jesus by him. He said, well, I'm going to identify him. The one I kiss is Jesus, so why would they need him to do that?
It's really dark.
It's really dark. There's no street lights in the garden, so could be that it's just for practical purposes. They couldn't decipher who Jesus was, discern who Jesus was. The Roman soldiers may well have never even seen Jesus, so they may have no idea who Jesus was, that big group of folks as such. So Jesus also was a regular-looking guy, so which I think is interesting. So Martha, read Isaiah chapter 53, verses 2 and 3.
For he grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of the parched ground. He has no stately form or majesty that we should look upon him, nor appearance that we should be attracted to him. He was despised and forsaken of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and like one from whom men hide their face, he was despised, and we did not esteem him.
So Isaiah says there he has no stately form or majesty, and that nor an appearance that we would take pleasure in him. So again, Jesus was a regular guy. He would look like anybody else during that day and time. Nothing made him stand out to be different. So in the dark, again, they may have needed someone to identify, pick out Jesus among his apostles that were. It's also to fulfill prophecy, Jamie says. Yep. So why did Judas not just point Jesus out rather than doing it by a kiss? A lot of people there. That's a good point. Maybe they could be mistaken if he didn't know who he was pointing at. Yeah. Yeah, the physical thing Jill says that Judas did would point out Jesus, certainly. So that could be the practical reason. Yeah. Yeah. Mark is saying this was a common greeting of the time. It was a common greeting of a disciple for a rabbi. So again, just another piece of evidence of the hypocritical nature of Judas, that he would give Jesus a kiss like he would the rabbi that he was following. So Mark went on to say something else about that too, which I... He still may have been trying to prevent his fellow apostles to realize what he was up to, I guess. Yeah, good point. All right, so how did Judas know where to find Jesus since Judas had left the Passover meal before it was over? How did he know to take all these folks to the garden? That was a typical place for him to go, Jamie says. So how do you know that? Pray. Oh, where he went to pray. So how do you know he went there to pray? You're right, but how do you know it? That song, yeah.
Another song, The Bible Tells Me So.
The Bible tells me so. That's a good song. And where does the Bible tell us that so? Luke chapter 2, verse 39 says, "And he came out and went, as was his habit, to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples also followed him." So we don't know this, but that Judas could have possibly first led this mob to the house, this upper room where they had the supper. We don't know that he didn't, so he could have led them there, and Jesus is already gone. So then he thinks, well, where else could Jesus be? And it's in this place that he regularly visited, that he habitually visited, it said. So Judas, again, was a man who abandoned God. He literally gave Jesus the kiss of death. So in John chapter 18, verses 4 through 9, John records a conversation between Jesus and the mob, and these verses say, Martha, if you would read those.
So Jesus, knowing all the things that were coming upon him, went forth and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" And they answered him, "Jesus the Nazarene." And he said to them, "I am he." And Judas also, who was betraying him, was standing with them. So when he said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Therefore he again asked them, "Whom do you seek?" And they said, "Jesus the Nazarene." And Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you seek me, let these go their way." To fulfill the word which he spoke. Of all those whom you have given me, I lost not one.
All right, so why did Jesus ask the mob leader in this conversation that Martha just read? What did Jesus ask the mob leader in this conversation? Who do you seek? So Jesus voluntarily comes up to the mob and says, "Who are you looking for?" And what did the mob leader respond to Jesus? Jesus the Nazarene. So why did the mob leader say Jesus the Nazarene instead of just Jesus? Jesus was a common name at that time. So again, the identifier was the Nazarene, and a lot of times we talked about Joseph of Arimathea, people were identified as from where they were from, like Jesus the Nazarene, or they could be identified by their father, Jesus, the son of Joseph, or whomever it might be. So, you know, James and John were identified as the sons of Zebedee. So again, people didn't necessarily have last names like we do. So they were identified by places or by their family. So also is probably an insult to Jesus in that that Jesus who is from that podunk town of Nazareth. You know, again, that was up in Galilee. The Judeans, the Romans, whatever would look down on a Galilean as such. So do you find anything interesting in Jesus? Oh, what did Jesus' response? What was his response to them? What did he say? I am he. Jesus said, I am he. So do you find anything interesting in Jesus' response?
But they all fell down. I think that's interesting.
It's interesting they all fell down at Jesus' response. The crowd fell down. We'll get into that in a minute, a little more into that. Anything else you find interesting in that? Didn't try to deny it as a simple, straightforward answer to it. I am he. Would have made it clear. What would this have made it clear to the Jewish leaders? I am. So if you look and think about in Moses' conversation with God in Exodus chapter 3, verses 3 through 14, it says, Then Moses said to God, Behold, I'm going to the sons of Israel, and I will say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you. Now they may say to Moses, What is his name? What shall I say to them? And God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, This is what you shall say to the sons of Israel, I am has sent me to you. So you also may recall the conversation between the Samaritan woman at the well and Jesus in John chapter 4, verses 25 through 26. And it says, When the woman said to him, I know that the Messiah is coming. He who is called Christ. When that one comes, he will declare all things to us. Jesus said to her, I am he, the one speaking to you. So here the Jewish authorities would have recognized, based on this conversation between Moses and God from Exodus, they would recognize when Jesus said, I am he again is declaring, I am the Messiah. I am God. So those people that say, well, God, that Jesus never said he was God, really don't understand the Jewish background in which Jesus was interacting. So there are 7 I am statements Jesus makes in the Gospel of John, and several additional times Jesus refers to himself as I am he. So 2 of these I am he statements are John 18:5, and then the others John 4:26. So again, they're clear references to Jesus identifying himself as God, as he did, as Moses learned in Exodus chapter 2. So the 7 I am statements are, and you have fill in the blanks there, I think very well known statements. The first one is, I am the bread of life. So what on Jesus? Fall, what on? Feast? Feed. I had feast, so very similar. Feast on Jesus. So that's John chapter 6, verse 35. I am the light of the world, come out of darkness. John 8:12. I am, next one's, I am the of the sheep. Door of the sheep. So what the shepherd in? Follow the shepherd in. John chapter 10, verse 7. And next one is, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd cares for the sheep and lays down his life for the sheep. John chapter 10, verse 11. I am the resurrection and the life. Y'all are really getting this. Though one believes, though dies, he will live. John chapter 11, verse 25. I am the way, the
truth,
and the
life.
life. Jesus is the true. That's the harder one. Path or way. He is the truth with a capital T, Word of God. And life, he is the creator and sustainer. Thank you. John chapter 14, verse 6. And then the seventh is, I am the true vine. Believers are to be branches of the true vine. John chapter 15, verse 1. So in John's gospel account, how did the mob respond? I think Martha, I think, just said this. When Jesus said to them, I am he, fell to the ground, didn't he? Fell to the ground. So falling, do you think that would be a natural? What do you think about that? Of course, that's supernatural in. Jamie said that in the Greek, I guess the Septuagint, it just says I am, and evidently he was added later by other writers when it was translated. But it's she says a snippet of what is to come. So she says it's supernatural. So maybe it's supernatural, but maybe it's also a natural reaction to divine revelation. What happened when Moses was at the burning bush? Now, he felt. What happens when we see people even interacting with angels? They fall down. So it's a supernatural but a natural reaction. In John's revelation, John encounters Christ in Revelation chapter 1, verses 17 and 18. And in that reaction, those verses, John's reaction was falling to the ground in humble worship. And these verses say, when John saw him, I fell at his feet like a dead man. And he placed his right hand on me, saying, do not be afraid. I am the first and the last and the living one. And I was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and of Hades. So we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute too. So Martha, though, at this point, would you read on Mark chapter 14, verses 46 through 50?
And after coming, Judas immediately went to him and said, Rabbi, and kissed him. And they laid hands on him and arrested him. But one of those who stood by drew his sword and struck the slave of a high priest and cut off his ear. And Jesus said to them, have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me, as you would against a man inciting a revolt? Every day I was with you within the temple grounds teaching, and you did not arrest me, but this has taken place so that the scriptures will be fulfilled. And his disciples all left him and fled.
Mm-hmm. So I think Jamie said earlier that part of this is, fulfillment of prophecy, and we see that specifically stated here. And then in Mark chapter 14, verse 46, it tells us that the mob then arrested Jesus. And if you look in this same account in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 22, verse 49, the disciples asked then, when those who were around him saw what was going to happen, they said, Lord, shall we strike with the sword? So before Jesus could respond, what happened? Peter cut off the slave's ear. And so the next actor in this drama is the impulsive disciple. Very good. So who was the impulsive disciple who cut off the ear of the slave? Jill just said it was Peter. So John 18:10 Again, the Bible tells us when it says, "And Simon Peter, since he had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's slave and cut off his right ear." So what's the name of the slave? Malchus. Very good. Bible trivia question there. So John chapter 18, verse 10 tells us that. So where did this impulsive person, this impulsive disciple Peter, get this sword to cut off the slave's ear? Stole it from a soldier. What'd you say, Jeff? Had it on him. Yeah, he had it on him. Where'd he get it? Stole it from a soldier. He just carried it around like we used to carry pocket knives, back in the olden days, I guess. Maybe. What did you say, Mark? You were saying something? Oh, I thought so. Let's look at, Martha, if you would read, where are we here? Excuse me.
Luke.
Yeah, thank you.
Luke 22, 35 through 38.
Thank you.
And he said to them, "When I sent you out without money belt and bag and sandals, you did not lack anything, did you?" And they said, "No, nothing." And he said to them, "But now whoever has a money belt is to take it along likewise, also a bag. And whoever has no sword is to sell his coat and buy one. For I tell you that this which is written must be fulfilled in me." And he was numbered with transgressors. And for that refers to me as its fulfillment. And they said, "Lord, look here are 2 swords." And he said to them, "It is enough."
All right, so before the disciples went out to the Garden of Gethsemane, they're having a meal, the Passover meal, and then the last First Supper. And they have this conversation, and one of them says, "Well, here's 2 swords." And Jesus says, "Well, that's enough." And evidently Peter got one of the swords. And we don't know who got the other one. So they were, evidently these swords were at the house where they were having this Last Supper, where they're having Passover. And Peter, being the leader of the apostles, probably naturally he got one of the swords. So do you think the impulsive disciple Peter was aiming for the slave's ear? Probably not. So what do you think he's aiming at? His head. I think he was trying to cut off his head. I agree with Jill. And more than likely the slave ducked. Peter, being a fisherman, not a swordsman, probably wasn't all that good with it to begin with. Missed and got his ear. So with that. So what's that? Yeah, like Trump's ear. He wasn't aiming for the ear, but he missed. So I'm not sure I'd equate. Well, we're not going there. Good, Nancy. So why do you think Peter felt like, well, I'm just going to take this sword and start trying to cut off people's heads? He was mad, maybe. We're going to see Peter and the rest of them run off and hide here in a little while. So why would Peter, with this big mob, maybe up to 600 soldiers and Roman soldiers and a private police force from the chief priests and so forth, why would he feel like, hey, I'm going to try this? Yeah. Yeah. So Peter earlier had said, "I'll die for you." So maybe he was really following through on that statement he made here, and then later he decides that wasn't such a good idea, so he runs off and hides. Yeah. Peter may be Stan says, Peter may be holding on to the notion that Jesus' kingdom is an earthly kingdom, so it's time to start the battle as such, maybe. But why was he emboldened to do that at this point?
Maybe he thought Jesus was going to do a miracle. And
Maybe he thought Jesus was going to do a miracle. Oh, you got a microphone. I don't know why I'm repeating you. Maybe he thought they would take Peter and those with him as well. What had just happened just shortly before this? What had happened to all these soldiers and private police force and so forth? They just fell down to the ground, so Peter may have thought, well, these folks, they're all kind of fearful here. They just fell to the ground. I'm emboldened now. I can strike out. So he
may have wondered, why do I have this sword? He told me to take a sword.
Yeah.
So I intend to use it.
Yeah. Why did I take this sword? He intended to use it. So maybe that's it. Again, maybe some or all those are the reasons that he did it. But I think he was somewhat emboldened because he just saw maybe up to 600 Roman soldiers fall to the ground, and the private police force of the Sanhedrin do the same. So he thought, I'm in Peter, I'm in control here. I can take a risk. I can do this kind of thing. So, yeah, we are talking about Peter. He didn't think much before he. A lot of times he didn't think much before he acted, so he may have not thought much this time before he acted. So, the impulsive disciple, exactly. So, the impulsive disciple will be described as the one who doesn't listen to God and acts on his own. And we're going to see here in a minute, Peter gets reprimanded for what he did. So then the most important actor in the whole drama is Christ Jesus. So how did Jesus respond to the disciples' impulsive action? How did Jesus respond to Peter's action? Yeah. But Luke 22:51 says what Mark says. But Jesus responded and said, "Stop, no more of this." And then he touched his ear and healed him. So, how did Jesus heal Malchus's ear? He touched it. What's significant about that? Two or three things. Yeah, in the movie he picked it up and put it back on, but is that what he did? No, he touched it. So Jesus is the creator. He didn't need to pick up the ear. He created a new ear. He just touched it. Yeah. So, don't believe everything you see in the movies. Other than that 1947 Kiss of Death movie, you probably believe me. Yeah, so I just thought that's kind of remarkable. And we see throughout the ministry of Jesus the importance of touch. And here we see Jesus again touching Malchus's ear and creating a new ear. So second is Jesus then puts a triple reprimand on Peter. In Matthew chapter 26, verses 52 through 54, it gives us the details of this reprimand that Jesus gave Peter. And it says, "Then Jesus said to him, 'Put your sword back in this place,'" similar to what Mark just said, "'for all those who take up the sword will perish by the sword. Or do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels?" Put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels. "How then would the scriptures be fulfilled which say that it must happen this way?" So there's three reprimands of Peter in these verses in Matthew. What's the first reprimand to Peter? Put the sword away. In other words, we'd say violence is not the answer. Put the sword away. And then secondly, he chastises Peter. And what's he tell him? If I needed help, what could I do? I could pray. Call 12 legions of angels. You know how many angels that would be? A legion had 6,000 troops in it. So 12 legions would be 72,000 angels. And if you look back at 2 Kings chapter 19, verses 35, it says, "Then it happened that night the angel of the Lord went out and struck 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians, and when the rest got up early in the morning, behold, all of the 185,000 were dead." So if one angel could kill 185,000, then if you did your math, 72,000 angels could kill 13.3 billion with a B people. So he's saying, look, if I wanted to take care of this, if one angel can kill 185,000, if I called 12 legions of angels, it wouldn't be a battle. I would wipe them all out. So he's reprimanding Peter there again, that I don't need your help, Peter. I'm in control of this situation. This is fulfilling prophecy. And then the third reprimand is, somebody said this earlier, maybe it's Jamie, Scripture was being fulfilled. This is prophetic. So here this is happening because in verse 54, how otherwise would the Scriptures be fulfilled, which say it must happen this way. So Jesus then asked a rhetorical question and made a statement following this question in Mark chapter 14, verse 49, which was, "Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me, as you would against a man inciting a revolt? Every day I was with you within the temple grounds teaching, and you did not arrest me." Why did Jesus ask this rhetorical question and make a statement about this question? They could have done it already. Where did Jesus say he had been and what was going on? His everyday life. Every day he was around, available to them. He was in the temple. He's in a recognizable place, the most recognizable place in Jerusalem. He was in the temple every day. But they had not approached him during these times in the temple. Jesus was pointing out to them the religious establishment's hypocrisy and cowardice, that they were there arresting him in the middle of the night in a secluded place. So Jesus was making the point that the Jewish religious establishment had tried to kill him several times, but they had failed because it was not God's timing. This was going to be the fulfillment of prophecy. So in this plan, God's plan is prophesied in several places throughout the Bible. In 2 or 3 different Psalms is prophesied, in Isaiah, Zechariah, and Jesus himself prophesied this in Mark chapter 8, verse 31, Mark chapter 9, verse 31, and Mark chapter 10, verses 32 and 34. So in this whole situation of all these actors that we've talked about in this drama, Jesus is the only one here who remembered God. He's the only one in the garden who was in complete control of the situation. Jesus was fulfilling God's plan for redemption. And then we see another group of actors, who are they? Cowardly apostles, yeah. So what action did the apostles take upon the arrest of Jesus? They ran away. So what do you think about the apostles leaving Jesus and fleeing? Very human, yeah, very human. They were fearful. I think it is interesting. In John chapter 18, verses 8 and 9, chapter 18, verses 8 and 9, it says, Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you're seeking me, let these men go on their way." This took place so that the word which he spoke would be fulfilled. Of those whom you have given me, I lost not one. So here, you look at this kind of from a different perspective. The apostles were being obedient to Jesus. They were being obedient to the fulfillment of the scripture that Jesus was not to lose one of them. But we see on the other hand, when the shepherd is removed, what happens to the sheep? They scattered. So, what was cowardly about the apostles leaving Jesus and fleeing? They didn't want to die. You know, again, I think this is I'd always kind of looked at this differently to this lesson, and I think that, again, they were human. They fled. They were fearful. It was a fulfillment of prophecy that Jesus would not lose one of them. But after they flee, what did they do? The shepherd was removed, and what happened? They scattered. What were they supposed to do? John chapter 17, verse 11 says, and Jesus is speaking and praying in the upper room, he said, so that they may be one just as we are. So instead of sticking together and coming back together as a group, as one, they split up. So I don't know that them leaving was where they were disobedient. Them not remaining together, remaining unified, which we don't see them coming back together until after Jesus' resurrection. Okay? So the 11, you might say, were a group who for a time had forgotten God. Okay? So let's finish this up. Mark chapter 14, verses 51 and 52.
A young man was following him, wearing nothing but a linen sheet over his naked body, and they seized him. But he pulled free of the linen sheet and escaped naked.
So Mark is the only one that describes a strange incident that happened. So this streaker. So what do you think this streaker? Who do you think this streaker was? And that's recorded here in Mark chapter 14.
You told us, Mark.
Oh, I told you. Oh, okay. I let it slip out. Okay, Mark. It was John Mark. Yeah. So that's who most theologians believe it was. So why would most theologians conclude that this streaker was John Mark?
Well, the disciples had already gone, so I guess he was still there.
He was still there, but he was on the run. But how would John Mark know to be there? Jeff, you were going to say something? Yeah. Well, Jeff says it's kind of a confession that John Mark was there, and he says, I don't know why he was wearing a sheet and
You
naked.
told us one time that you thought the Lord's Supper had been in John Mark's house.
John Mark's mother's house.
house.
So
Yeah.
John Mark could have been in bed, and he hears this disturbance, and they're all leaving now. They're singing, they're leaving. He says, I wonder where they're going. So I'll just wrap the sheet around me, go out and follow them, see what they're up to. And there he is, and he runs into this incident that he wasn't necessarily prepared for. So he is the first and maybe only Christian streaker we see in the Bible. So.
Well, you said maybe Judas they'd all gone to his house first, and so maybe that woke him up and he knew.
Yeah, maybe the crowd that came to Jesus' house woke him up to the mob that came there as well. So he ran out to see what was happening. Yep, good, could very well be. So we got about a minute here. What are the takeaways or applications for our lives from today's lesson? Don't act impulsively. Yeah. Think before you act. Put your clothes on before you go out to follow Jesus.
You
Yeah.
would gather a crowd anyway, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Yeah. Even in a dangerous situation, Nancy says, don't be afraid to deny Jesus or don't deny Jesus, and don't be afraid to die. Good one. So as I think about these different actors, think about which one may describe you and me. First one is one who is blind to God. Then one who has abandoned God. One who doesn't listen to God and acts on his own. One who for a time who has forgotten God. And then one who is unified with Jesus Christ in faith and obedience. So as we consider which one are we, which one am I, then hopefully we're the last one who is unified with Jesus in faith and obedience. And then the other thought is, are you streaking through life, or have you, as the psalmist declared, anchored yourself on the rock? Psalm 62:2 says, He alone is my rock and my salvation, my stronghold. I will not be greatly shaken. So again, don't be streaking. So then how do we see Jesus in today's lesson? We're out of time, so I'm just going to say this. So to those in the garden, it may not appear to be so, but Jesus was in complete control of the situation. They thought they were in control, but really Jesus was fulfilling God's plan of redemption. He was in control of the situation. We can have hope because Jesus is also in control of the situations in our lives as well. He has fulfilled the plan of redemption, so we can, as believers, we have assurance that we are saved. So things may seem out of control in your life, but you may have hope, because even if things don't seem to be, or things do seem to be out of control, we can claim Romans chapter 8, verse 28. It says, we know God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. So, thank y'all for being here this morning. We'll continue in Mark next week, chapter 14, verses 53 through 65. So